He said it like it was nothing, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I don't shake hands with staff." The words slipped out of his mouth with a smirk, smooth as the polished marble floors beneath his $1,000 shoes. The conference room fell silent for a second, but it wasn't the kind of silence that followed awe or admiration. It was the kind that prickled beneath the skin. The kind that held its breath and waited for something to snap. Ava Jordan didn't flinch. She just blinked once, slowly, like she was processing what she'd just heard, and then calmly lowered her hand, the same one she'd offered to the billionaire moments earlier. Her expression didn't change. Not a flicker. Not even a tight-lipped smile to mask discomfort. She had been in rooms like this before, faced worse. But something about today. Something about this man's tone. It pressed a button she'd kept buried for a long time. He barely glanced at her again, turning his attention to the cluster of sharply dressed executives seated around the long glass table. Men in navy suits, whispering numbers like secrets, chuckling under their breath. No one said anything. No one stood up. Because this man, Logan Pierce, was that kind of billionaire. The kind people didn't question. The kind who built empires by treating boardrooms like battlefields. But what Logan didn't know, what no one in that room realized, was that Ava Jordan wasn't just staff. And she definitely wasn't going to be dismissed like one. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes from the moment he refused her handshake to the moment the call came in. A short, quiet ring that changed the energy in the room like a thunderclap out of nowhere. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind to how they even ended up in that room together. Ava Jordan had grown up on the south side of Atlanta, raised by a single mother who cleaned homes during the day and read business magazines at night. She wasn't born into wealth, but she was born with a sharp mind, a backbone made of steel, and a vision that most people never saw coming. While other kids dreamed of basketball fame or pop star status, Ava dreamed of building something real, something lasting. By 32, she'd done just that. Quietly, without the headlines or the handshakes, she'd become one of the most trusted private advisors for a global equity firm known only by insiders. The kind of firm that moved billions like chess pieces, made or broke entire industries, and never put a name on the door. So when she walked into that room that morning, it wasn't just to assist with a deal, it was to decide one. Logan Pierce, on the other hand, was the face of flashy success. Self-made, they said, though whispers always hinted at a quiet inheritance from a great uncle nobody could trace. His empire was loud, his presence louder. He liked making noise. Grand entrances, private jets, PR stunts. He ran a chain of elite tech campuses and had recently launched a luxury wellness brand for executives, under stress. His companies looked good on paper, even better in glossy magazines. But lately, the numbers weren't adding up. Rumors of mismanagement had started to swirl, and investors were getting nervous. That's why this meeting mattered. He was seeking a $4 billion backing from Ava's firm, a lifeline that would keep his empire afloat. Only he didn't know she was the one holding the pen. He hadn't even read the dossier fully. Hadn't bothered to look past her title. Senior analyst. Just another staff member to him. Detail. A background figure. Until that moment. Until the call. Ava had barely looked at her phone before nodding once and standing up. The room went quiet again. Still polite, still playing the game, but charged now. She walked slowly toward the window, the morning light casting a soft halo around her. And then she turned back and said calmly, "Gentlemen, there's been a change in the agenda." Logan glanced up, confused. "What are you talking about?" Ava smiled. It wasn't unkind. It wasn't smug. It was just calm. The kind of calm that comes when a storm is coming, and you're the only one who knows it. "I just pulled the offer," she said. "The $4 billion is off the table." You could have heard a pin drop. "What?" Logan said, leaning forward now, suddenly paying attention. "What do you mean you pulled it? You don't make that call." She tilted her head. "Actually, I do." And that's when everything shifted. One of the other executives, someone who did know Ava's name, sat straighter. Another checked his tablet, scrolling quickly through her profile, eyes widening as he reached a certain line. Chair of the Internal Equity Committee. She had been the silent force behind several major acquisitions, restructurings, and, more importantly, shutdowns. She was the woman people listened to after the billionaires finished talking. Logan stood up. "You can't be serious." "I am," Ava replied, voice steady. "You asked us for trust. You asked US to invest. But 5 minutes in a room with you and I can already see how you lead. How you treat people. That tells me everything I need to know." She picked up her folder, tucked her phone back in her blazer, and walked toward the door. And just before she stepped out, she paused. "Oh, and Logan. Staff don't forget." And just like that, she was gone. What happened after? That's a story still unfolding. But the whisper spread fast. Within hours, Logan's board was in chaos, shareholders demanding answers. Ava's name, once quiet, began to rise. Some called it a power move. Others called it justice. But to Ava, it was just another Tuesday. Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one no one bothered to see. And as the door clicked shut behind her, one thought echoed in Logan Pierce's mind louder than anything else. He should have shaken her hand. Logan stood frozen, staring at the door long after Ava had left the room. The silence that followed her exit wasn't just awkward. It was thick, almost suffocating. Nobody knew what to say. The other executives exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. For once, Logan Pierce, the billionaire who always had the last word, had nothing to say. He dropped back into his chair, his jaw tightening. His face, usually so polished and composed, now carried a flicker of confusion, maybe even fear. He had spent years controlling rooms like this. Deals bent to his voice, people followed his lead. But Ava Jordan, she didn't blink, didn't flinch. And now, she had just pulled $4 billion out from under him like it was nothing. 5 minutes. That's all it took to unravel months of planning, strategy, and carefully arranged meetings. One moment of arrogance. One line that he had said 1,000 times before. But this time, it landed differently. This time it had consequences. Still, Logan wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily. He leaned forward, tapped on the sleek conference table, and looked at his assistant. "Get her back in here," he said quietly. The assistant shifted uncomfortably. "Sure. I don't think that's going to happen." Logan looked up slowly, his voice low. "I said bring her back." The assistant hesitated, then spoke carefully. "She just left the building. She was already on a call before she even stepped into the elevator. Looked like damage control. But not for her, for us." Logan exhaled sharply, dragging a hand down his face. The weight of what had just happened started to settle in. He wasn't just losing a deal, he was losing time, leverage, and possibly credibility. But more than that, he was realizing something he never thought would matter in this world of numbers and power. He had underestimated her. Back in her car, Ava didn't look back. She sat in the back seat of a sleek black SUV. Her phone pressed to her ear, calm as ever. "Yes, I've pulled it," she said. "There's no value in going forward. His team doesn't understand leadership. They treat people like numbers, and worse, like they're disposable. That's not who we back." There was a pause, then a soft voice on the other end responded. "Understood. We trust your judgment, Ava. Just let us know what direction you want to move next." Ava ended the call, placed her phone on the seat beside her, and looked out the window. Her reflection stared back, composed, thoughtful, and firm. But behind her eyes was a storm. This wasn't just about a handshake. It wasn't even just about respect. It was about the quiet message people like Logan Pierce sent every time they walked into a room and looked down on someone who looked like her. This wasn't the first time Ava had been dismissed. Not the first time she had been overlooked, brushed aside, or treated like part of the background. But today felt different. Today, she had pulled the rug out from under a man who never saw it coming. And deep down, she knew the fallout had just begun. In the days that followed, the whispers grew louder. Across private equity circles, quiet chatter turned into full-blown discussions. Did you hear what happened with Ava Jordan and Logan Pierce? She pulled $4 billion just like that. She barely spoke, didn't raise her voice, just stood up and walked. Some admired her, others were rattled, but everyone took notice. Meanwhile, Logan's empire started to show cracks. Investors began to ask questions, sharp ones. Internal emails leaked. An anonymous source from his company revealed a toxic culture, one where staff turnover was high and employee morale was at an all-time low. Ava's move had not only taken away funding, it had lifted a veil. Now people were looking closer. And what they were seeing didn't look good. Logan tried to spin the story. Press releases went out, interviews were requested, statements crafted carefully to make it seem like the funding delay was mutual. But people close to the industry knew the truth. And the truth was, he had fumbled something massive. His board wasn't happy either. 2 major directors reached out privately to Ava's firm, trying to reopen the conversation, but she refused to take their calls. Not out of pride, but because she already knew what kind of leadership they endorsed. And no amount of money could undo what had been said in that room. But while Logan's world felt like it was spinning, Ava's only became more focused. She spent her evenings reading through new proposals, startups with real heart, led by people who believed in more than just bottom lines. One in particular caught her attention. A tech company in Detroit building affordable healthcare tools for low-income communities. Run by a young black founder named Isaiah Carter, the company was innovative, lean, and built on empathy. Ava saw herself in Isaiah, young, underestimated, building something from nothing. She made the call that night. "Let's talk," she said simply. Logan, meanwhile, had become obsessed with trying to control the damage. He hired a crisis PR firm, tried to set up a private meeting with Ava through mutual contacts, and even sent a handwritten letter. But none of it worked, because this wasn't about a handshake anymore. It was about something much deeper. A moment that revealed how little he saw beyond himself. He started losing partners quietly. One by one, longtime allies pulled back, citing timing and market shifts. But Logan knew the truth. Ava's quiet exit had set something in motion, something he couldn't stop. At the center of all this was a woman who had learned long ago that power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it speaks in silence, in calm exits, in pulled deals, in the choice to walk away when walking away means more than staying. And though Ava didn't seek revenge, she knew this. The world was watching now. Watching how billionaires led. Watching who they ignored. Watching who stood up when it mattered. Because in a room full of titles and tailored suits, it wasn't the richest person who held the real power. It was the one they didn't see coming. And Ava Jordan had just made sure the world would never forget her name. But this was only the beginning. Because somewhere, in a glass office overlooking the skyline, Logan Pierce had just received an anonymous tip, something buried deep inside his own company. File marked confidential. A report Ava never mentioned in that room. And what was inside could do more than cancel a deal. It could bring the whole company down. The email hit Logan's inbox at 2:14 a.m. No subject line. No sender name he recognized. Just one file attached. Employees.final.pdf. At first, he nearly deleted it, assuming it was another leak or internal frustration forwarded to him out of spite. But something about the quiet timing, the lack of noise around it, made him pause. He opened the file. What he found inside wasn't just bad, it was devastating. Page after page of anonymous comments from his own employees. Some pages filled with cold, brutal honesty. Others short and bitter. Words like toxic, fear-driven, hostile, and invisible appeared again and again. There were charts too, about leadership trust, satisfaction, long-term retention. All of them showed steady decline over the past 18 months. And buried halfway through the file was a stat that turned his stomach. 76% of employees would not recommend working at his company to a friend. He leaned back, staring at the screen as if it could take the words back. But they didn't move. They just sat there, glaring at him. What disturbed him most wasn't just the numbers. It was that he had never seen this report before. Someone had kept it from him. Or worse, buried it on purpose. And now, Ava had it. Or at least that's what he assumed. Had she known? Had that file been the real reason she walked away so easily? Not just because he refused the handshake, but because she'd already seen who he was behind the boardroom smile. The next morning, Logan called an emergency meeting. Only 3 people showed up. His chief operating officer, Diane, his longtime legal advisor, Rob, and Talia, the new head of internal strategy. The rest, silent, unavailable. Some were already sending messages through assistants about stepping back from current roles. The ship was starting to tilt. Logan placed the survey report on the table. Did any of you know about this? Diane frowned. That looks like the pulse survey we commissioned last year, but I was told it never made it past initial review. Talia reached for the report, flipping through it. This was buried, she said quietly. Someone made sure it didn't get shared. By who? Logan's voice was sharper now. This is months of data. Hundreds of voices. No one thought it was important enough to show me. Rob cleared his throat. It's not about what you were shown, Logan. It's about what people were too afraid to say. And maybe it's about what you weren't willing to see. The words hit harder than expected. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Talia added, "You're looking at this like it's sabotage. But maybe it's the truth finally catching up." Logan rubbed his temples. His empire wasn't just losing money. It was bleeding from the inside. People were turning away from him. Investors were shifting focus. And now, Ava Jordan, whose name was becoming louder in every corner of finance, had quietly positioned herself as a symbol of something different. Integrity, respect, power without ego. And Logan. He was starting to realize he had built his success on silence, on people being too afraid to challenge him. That silence was gone now. Meanwhile, across the city, Ava was in a modest office, seated at a small round table with Isaiah Carter. The young founder had just finished his pitch. His voice still carried a trace of nervous energy, but his ideas were sharp, grounded, honest. He wasn't looking to become the next flashy billionaire. He just wanted to build something that mattered. Ava smiled as she closed the folder. "You're doing more with half the budget than most do with millions. That tells me everything I need to know." Isaiah looked stunned. "So, you're in." "We'll start with a $40 million strategic investment," she replied. "Long-term partnership. Not just money but support, resources, and connections. You won't have to chase attention. Just build the right thing." He let out a breath he'd been holding for weeks. "I won't let you down." Ava stood, shook his hand, and nodded. "I know." But as she walked out of the room, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A short text. "You have the file. Meet me. 5th and Lenox. Tonight. 9 p.m. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Whoever sent it already knew she'd come. That evening, she arrived at the corner just before 9. The street was quiet, the air warm. A man stepped out of the shadows. It was Marcus, Logan's former VP of Internal Culture. He had left the company months earlier, supposedly for personal reasons. But Ava knew better. "You sent the file," she said. He nodded. "It was supposed to go to the board. But the legal team blocked it, buried it, told me to stay quiet. So I left. But when I saw what happened in that meeting with you, I knew you had to see the truth." Ava watched him carefully. "You think this will bring him down?" Marcus shook his head. "No, not by itself. But it'll force him to confront what he's built. And it might give the people who work there a voice." Ava nodded slowly. "Thank you." As Marcus turned to leave, he added, "There's more. Second report. Internal audit. HR complaints. A list of pay discrepancies, racial bias patterns. It's not just about disrespect. It's about the system behind him. She felt a chill rise in her spine. If that second file was as serious as he said, then Logan wasn't just losing money. He was sitting on a scandal big enough to collapse everything he'd touched. Later that night, Logan sat alone in his office, staring out at the city lights. The media hadn't broken the full story yet. But pressure was building. The whispers were louder. And Ava. She wasn't even speaking publicly. She didn't need to. She was just moving. Quietly. Strategically. And every move she made was one step closer to something Logan wasn't ready to face. Because sometimes, the real threat isn't the one that screams the loudest. It's the one who walks away. And takes everything with her. The next morning, Logan's phone didn't stop ringing. Calls from board members. Messages from investors. Emails flagged urgent. Subject lines growing bolder by the hour. Internal audit leak? Employee complaint data confirmed. Media holding story. 24 hours to respond. He hadn't even seen the second report yet, but the buzz around it had already reached the ears of a few journalists. Someone was talking. And worse, someone had evidence. His assistant appeared at the door of his office, face pale. "Logan, we just got a request for comment from the Financial Herald. They have the full file. All of it." He stood up. "Who leaked it?" She hesitated. "They wouldn't say. But they mentioned one name in the subject line. Ava Jordan." He froze. It wasn't a direct accusation, but it didn't have to be. Just her name was enough to make the pressure spike. To make the room feel smaller. To make Logan realize he was no longer in control of the story. In the background, news alerts pinged across phones and laptops. One headline after another appearing online. Billionaire culture under fire after $4 billion deal pulled. Internal survey reveals toxic patterns at Pierce Enterprises. Ava Jordan, the analyst who turned the tables. Logan's name wasn't just trending anymore. It was being dragged through forums, finance blogs, and employee review boards. Stories poured in from former staff. Low pay, verbal intimidation, careers stalled for questioning policies. The narrative was no longer just about a handshake. It was about the system behind it. And now, it was all unraveling in real time. He paced the room, jaw clenched, as if movement could slow what was happening. "We need to do something," he muttered. "We need a statement. We need to stop this." Rob, his legal advisor, walked in moments later. He didn't look like a man with solutions. He looked like someone who knew the storm had already made landfall. "There's more coming, Logan," he said quietly. "The second report. It includes names, patterns in promotion bias, gender gaps, anonymous harassment claims. If we go public with anything right now, we could be admitting to knowledge we've denied. So what do you want me to do? Sit here and let everything burn?" Logan snapped. Rob didn't answer. Because deep down they both knew. This wasn't just a PR problem anymore. This was structural. This was years of arrogance, of cutting corners, of people being dismissed or silenced. And now the silence was over. Ava, meanwhile, was calm. She knew the media storm had started, but she stayed out of it. No interviews. No tweets. No statements. Just silence and strategy. She spent her days in back-to-back meetings with her team, fielding new partnerships, reviewing ethics policies for upcoming investments. She had become a symbol almost overnight. Not because she asked to be, but because people were hungry for someone who showed quiet power without ego. And more importantly, people who once felt invisible now had someone who made them feel seen. But behind closed doors, Ava was preparing. Because she knew Logan wasn't going to stay quiet. Billionaires like him never did. When they started to lose power, they didn't just fade away. They clawed, scrambled, tried to rewrite the story. And she wasn't naive. She knew she'd made enemies. That night, as she left her office, a black car idled at the curb. Not hers. Her driver wasn't due for another 15 minutes. She stopped walking. The rear window lowered just an inch. Voice spoke. "Come mail careful. Miss Jordan. We need to talk." She didn't respond. Instead, she took out her phone and started recording. The door opened and the man stepped out, dressed like a mid-level consultant, face familiar. She recognized him from a few industry events. One of Logan's people. He raised his hands slightly. "I'm not here to threaten you. I just need you to understand what's coming." Ava stood her ground. "Then speak." He looked around, lowered his voice. "Logan's trying to redirect the narrative. He's going to claim this was a targeted takedown, personal. He's already drafted a statement suggesting you acted with bias. That your firm wanted to damage him because of past disagreements." Ava raised an eyebrow. "That's not just desperate. That's dangerous." "He's not looking to win," the man said. "He's looking to survive. And if that means throwing your name into the fire, he will." She stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He's not just losing a company. He's losing the illusion of control. And that scares him." The man didn't argue. He just nodded. "Then be ready. Because the next move won't be quiet." He got back in the car and drove off. By morning, Logan's statement was live. Polished, careful, written by professionals, but sharp between the lines. He praised Ava's accomplishments while subtly implying personal motives may have clouded her judgment. He claimed the internal reports were incomplete and leaked selectively by a disgruntled former employee. He spoke about leadership evolution and the risks of reactionary decision-making in high-stakes financial environments. And he ended with a line that lit up every comment thread and business blog. "In today's world, silence can be mistaken for guilt. But real leadership means standing in the fire, even when others walk away." It was a bold move. It stirred opinions, pulled support from some, anger from others. But more importantly, it set the stage for what came next. Because Logan hadn't just challenged the truth. He'd tried to reshape it. And Ava. She read the statement from her office window, city lights flickering behind her, fingers tapping slowly on the edge of her desk. She didn't need to rush. Because she had the truth. Data. The witnesses. And something Logan never had, respect from those who mattered. But she also knew this wasn't about proving anything to him anymore. It was about what came next. Because now the world was watching. And in the shadows of collapsing legacies, something new was starting to rise. And the next move would change everything. The next day began like any other. Ava arrived at her office just after 7 a.m., coffee in hand, a quiet rhythm to her steps. Her team was already reviewing Logan's statement and planning a formal, fact-based reply. But before they could finalize anything, Ava's phone buzzed. It wasn't a message. It was a system alert from the firm's internal security team. Someone had accessed her private files. Not just her work email or meeting schedules. Her confidential deal reviews, investment notes, and client communications. The alert came with a timestamp. 3:42 a.m. Someone had gone in through a remote server under an outdated login, buried in archived access permissions from a former IT contractor. And whoever it was had downloaded everything. Ava stared at the screen, heart still. Her data was secured through layers of encryption, but the breach wasn't about stealing numbers. It was about control. About sending a message. And in her world, that message was loud. Within minutes, her head of cybersecurity was in her office, white-faced and tense. "We've isolated the breach and locked the system, but the files were already copied. We traced the login route. It pinged through 3 masked IPs. The last trace ended in a corporate server registered in the Caymans." Ava didn't need to ask who would go that far. Logan had crossed a line. And this wasn't just about media optics anymore. This was something darker. Personal. She turned to her assistant. "Clear my calendar. Now." While the office scrambled, Logan was already moving on his next phase. Just hours after the breach, a new narrative began to circulate through private investor circles. Whispers that Ava's firm had committed an ethics violation. Unverified, anonymous claims stating she had hidden a conflict of interest in the deal review process. There was no evidence, but it didn't matter. In high finance, even rumors could wound reputations faster than facts could heal them. Some were beginning to hesitate. Partners who once stood behind Ava started requesting clarification calls. Media outlets now included phrases like "both sides" and "pending internal review" in their headlines. And while she hadn't lost support outright, the ground beneath her feet was shifting. Still, Ava didn't flinch. She knew Logan's playbook: distract, confuse, smear. But what he didn't realize was that she had one more card, one she'd been holding back until now. 2 months before their initial meeting, Ava had been approached by a woman named Claire Tran. Claire was a mid-level compliance officer who had worked in Logan's company for nearly 5 years. She had quietly left after reporting misconduct, and had been silenced by a legal NDA. But what Logan didn't count on was Claire's decision to speak. Ava had helped her secure legal counsel through a third-party channel, and Claire had documented everything. Memos, emails, internal memos referencing ignored employee complaints, secret executive meetings where whistleblowers were blacklisted. And buried deep in her files was something Ava hadn't yet shared with anyone, not even her own team. An audio recording. One that captured a closed-door meeting between Logan and 2 of his executives. In it, he didn't just discuss suppressing the internal survey. He bragged about it, laughed even, called it useless noise. Worse, he made a comment about keeping staff scared enough to stay quiet. It was damning. But it wasn't legal to release without redactions and legal clearance. So Ava waited. Till now. Now that he had tried to breach her system. Now that he had planted lies. Now that the story was spiraling into a public standoff. She knew the time was coming. But as Ava prepared to move forward, she received another message. This one from Claire herself. Short. Frantic. I think someone followed me home last night. Car idling outside my building. Can we meet in person? Ava's breath caught. This wasn't just a business dispute anymore. It was turning into something more calculated, more dangerous. Someone didn't want Claire's story told. And Ava understood in that moment the stakes had changed. What started as a snub in a boardroom had become a full-blown battle, not just over money or pride, but over truth, over silence, over power. And the people standing in the way of that silence were now being watched. That evening, Ava met Claire in a quiet cafe on the east side of the city. Claire looked exhausted, her voice low. I saw him. I swear it was one of Logan's guys. I recognized him from a corporate party years ago. Ava leaned in. Do you still have the second drive? Claire nodded. Hidden. But I don't feel safe anymore. If they know I kept anything. Ava reached for her hand, steady. We'll protect you. But you need to let me bring this forward. Claire hesitated, then finally said, Okay. As they left the cafe, Ava's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a message from a source in regulatory affairs. Someone inside the Financial Compliance Commission. Just 4 words. He's under investigation now. Ava stopped walking. Claire turned to her. What does that mean? It means, Ava said slowly, eyes narrowing. He's not just losing control of the story. He's about to lose control of everything. But she knew Logan wouldn't go down without a fight. He had too much to lose. Too many secrets tied to too many people. And now, with regulatory bodies watching and the media circling, he'd be more dangerous than ever. What no one knew, what not even Ava expected, was that Logan still had one final card left to play. And when he used it, it wouldn't just threaten her reputation. It would drag up something from her past. Something she thought she'd buried for good. The morning Ava stepped into the federal hearing building, the sky was overcast, the kind that made everything feel heavier. Word had spread fast. Logan Pierce was being investigated for corporate misconduct, data tampering, and suppression of internal complaints. Reporters waited outside the entrance, their voices calling after Ava as she walked calmly inside, Claire Tran by her side. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Everything they needed to say had been recorded, documented, and sent to the proper authorities. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet tension. A panel of government officials sat at the front. Logan was already there, seated next to his lawyers. His expression flat but his eyes restless. He glanced at Ava once, just once, and she saw it in his face. Not anger, not fear, desperation. She took her seat across from him. The lead investigator, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a calm voice, opened the session. We're here today to discuss formal allegations against Mr. Logan Pierce concerning suppression of whistleblower claims, retaliatory tactics against former employees, and the misuse of investor funds in light of misleading internal audits. Ava listened without blinking. Claire's hands were clasped tightly in her lap. When the time came for Ava to speak, she stood. She spoke not with drama or force, but clarity. She explained what she saw in that boardroom weeks ago. She detailed the buried survey report, the targeted rumor campaign, and the breach of her private files. Then she nodded to Claire. Claire stepped up, voice shaking slightly but growing stronger with each sentence. She told her story. The intimidation. The things she saw executives cover up in meetings. Then Ava played the recording. The room shifted. Logan's voice came through the speakers, confident and unmistakable. He joked about keeping staff nervous but productive, and casually dismissed concerns from his own team. When the clip ended, there was silence. Heavy, loaded silence. Logan's lawyer stood, trying to object, claiming the recording was taken without consent, irrelevant, out of context. But it was too late. The mood had changed. The investigator looked at Logan directly. Mr. Pierce, you'll have an opportunity to respond formally. But I must warn you, the evidence presented here today is not just damaging, suggests a pattern. And we take patterns very seriously. Logan didn't reply. His face had gone pale. Outside, the media was already piecing the story together. Ava didn't stay to give a statement. She and Claire walked out the back exit, away from the noise. The next few days moved quickly. Logan's stock value plummeted. Several investors pulled out. A major sponsor dropped his name from their innovation summit. His board issued an internal vote to remove him as CEO pending the outcome of the investigation. For the first time in a decade, Logan Pierce had no microphone, no platform, and no control. Ava, meanwhile, returned to her office in quiet. No grand celebration. No interviews. Just work. Real work. She poured energy into Isaiah Carter's healthcare tech company, finalized a new partnership with a green energy startup led by an all-women engineering team, and worked with her firm to develop new internal policies ensuring whistleblowers would always be protected. But just when things began to settle, the final twist came. An envelope arrived on Ava's desk. No return address. Inside was a single photo and a handwritten note. The photo was old, grainy, black and white. A young girl, maybe 10 or 11, standing in front of a small brick house in Atlanta. Ava recognized the street instantly. It was the home she grew up in. But the twist wasn't the house. It was the man standing behind the girl. Younger, slimmer, no beard. But the eyes were unmistakable. It was Logan Pierce. The note said, "Not everything buried stays buried. See you soon." Ava sat back slowly, the photo trembling slightly in her hand. Her mind raced. She had never seen that image before. Never heard of Logan being in her neighborhood. But there he was, decades ago, watching, standing close enough to be noticed, but far enough to be forgotten. Was it just coincidence? A scare tactic? Or had he known who she was long before their first meeting? The thought chilled her. This battle may have ended, but a new one had just been revealed. One that didn't start in a boardroom. Started long ago. And Ava Jordan realized, for the first time, it was never just about a handshake. It was about a past neither of them had spoken of. Till now. Ava held the photo for a long time. Her fingers traced the edges, heart beating just a little too fast. That girl in the picture, her younger self, had no idea who was standing behind her. No idea that years later, that same man would stand across from her in a boardroom, in courtrooms, and eventually in her mind. She turned the note over again, but there was nothing else. No signature. Just those 6 words. Not everything buried stays buried. See you soon. She didn't panic. Not outwardly. Instead, she filed the photo away in a locked drawer and called one person she trusted completely. Isaiah Carter. They met in a quiet cafe later that evening. No suits, no assistants. Just 2 people with shared scars. He showed him the photo. Isaiah studied it without speaking, then nodded slowly. You think he's trying to scare you? Maybe, Ava replied. Or maybe it's something else. Something older. Isaiah leaned back in his chair. You ever hear of Pierce's background? Like where he actually came from? Ava shook her head. No one seems to know. The official story says he went to some private boarding school in Connecticut, then college, then founded Titan Dynamics. But everything before that. It's like a blank page. Isaiah looked thoughtful. Maybe it's time to find out what's on that page. Ava didn't want to go digging. She had always believed in moving forward. But this felt different. Felt personal. So she started asking questions. Quietly. She contacted a retired investigative journalist who had once profiled Logan's early years. She spoke to a librarian in Georgia who remembered a boy named Logan living in the neighborhood for a short time, under a different last name. Bit by bit, a new picture formed. Logan had grown up poor. Not just financially but emotionally. His father had been in and out of jail. His mother worked 3 jobs. They moved constantly. For one brief summer, they lived just 2 streets over from Ava's childhood home. Their paths never officially crossed, but maybe they did in some small, invisible way. Maybe Ava represented something to Logan even back then. Stability. A future he didn't think he could ever have. Or maybe she was just a memory he couldn't let go of, twisted by time and ambition. Whatever the reason, Logan had seen her long before she saw him. And maybe that's why he fought so hard to control her, to discredit her. Because deep down, he knew she wasn't just a threat to his company. She was a mirror to the life he could never reclaim. That realization didn't scare Ava. It softened something in her. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, but understanding. Meanwhile, Titan Dynamics began to crumble under public scrutiny. The board tried to install a temporary CEO. But lawsuits flooded in. Investors abandoned ship. Regulatory fines piled up. Logan's influence faded. And then quietly he disappeared. No more statements. No more press. Just gone. Some said he moved to South America. Others claimed he was still in the US, living under a different name. Ava didn't try to find him. She didn't need to. The story was no longer about him. It was about what came after. Claire Tran launched a non-profit dedicated to workplace protections and whistleblower support. It gained traction quickly, especially with Ava's backing and Isaiah's mentorship. They hosted seminars, worked with lawmakers, and created resources for young professionals who often had no voice. Isaiah's company flourished under Ava's strategic guidance. Together they developed an innovation hub for underrepresented founders. Young women, immigrants, former foster youth, with access to funding, mentorship, and space to build something new. Something that didn't have to start with power games or manipulation. Ava also reconnected with her mother, who had watched the hearings on TV with pride. They sat on the back porch one evening, sharing tea and memories. Her mom pointed at the photo Ava had finally shown her. I remember him, she said quietly. He used to sit across the street. Watched you ride your bike. I thought maybe he was just another lonely kid. Ava nodded slowly. Maybe he was. Weeks passed. Then months. The city moved on to the next scandal. The next story. But for Ava, something deeper had shifted. She learned that strength wasn't always about speaking louder. It was about speaking when you were most afraid. And leadership wasn't about controlling others. It was about standing up for those who couldn't. One late afternoon, as she sat in her quiet office overlooking the city, Ava opened a fresh notebook. No plans, no strategy, just thoughts. She wrote down a single line. Sometimes the people who try to bury you are the ones who first saw your light. Then she closed the book, stood up, and stepped into the soft golden light of the evening sun. The world was still messy, still unfair in many ways. But it was also full of people like Claire, Isaiah, like herself, people willing to stand, even when it meant standing alone. Ava had been many things in her life. An employee, a strategist, a survivor. But now she was something else entirely. Reminder. That truth, even whispered, can move mountains. That power, when misused, always meets its match. And that the most dangerous person in the room isn't always the one with the loudest voice. It's the one who never forgot who they were. The story ended not with a courtroom victory or a headline, but with something quieter. A return to self. A chance to rewrite what it meant to lead. And in that silence, Ava found peace. Real, unshakable peace. Even if the past still echoed softly in the background, she had learned how to listen, and how to move forward. One step, one truth, at a time.